Welcome to this week's Cattle Call on the Rural Radio Network. I'm Susan Littlefield. Today I'm at the Nebraska Governor's Agricultural and Economic Development Summit, which is taking place in Kearney, Nebraska. No surprise, there's a lot of hallway talk about agriculture and it ties into economic development. And speaking of economic development, we're definitely going to be talking about what's going on in this cattle market with some maybe optimism out there in the trade, especially when it comes to cash. Joining us today, Brad Kooima. He's with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. So let's kind of start off the fact that on a Wednesday morning, we saw a pop-up in this cash market. Did it kind of set the tone for what we're going to see the rest of the week?
Excuse me. I sure thought I did. Thanks for having me on. That's a long title for where I feel somewhat, I feel like a pair of tennis shoes out of a very important organization here. It's I should have dressed up. Come out with the regional this morning, right out of the chute at 188, which is basically the top of the market last week on a Wednesday. Great sign, right? You know, a handful of cattle have traded that way. But I think that gave everybody kind of a little more, arch in their step, right? Thinking that I believe, and I think a lot of us started the week thinking that on the right kind, that we maybe get back to that 190 figure. Now, the right kind, cattle that'll grade, are hard to come by because we continue to see these cattle getting pulled forward. We stay very, very current in my neck of the woods. And as a guy that I thought a lot of in terms of markets, always said every market begins and ends in Iowa. Nothing personal against you guys in Nebraska, but sometimes Iowa farmer feeders lack discipline and we get behind, and sometimes not so much like we are now where we're extremely current, and that there's a fine line always, Susan, between too many and not enough.
So what are you thinking weight wise right now for these cattle, especially since we came off of a few weeks ago of historically high temperatures, not only in Nebraska and Iowa, but just across the country?
I think sorry, I don't mean to go down this rabbit hole with you again, but knowing that the weights are 13 days late when we get them, which is ridiculous. It's stupid. There's no reason it has to be this way. Anyway, that's part of the bill that we're trying to push through with the Grassley Fisher bill. But anyway, so knowing that, I am curious to see what Thursday's weights are going to look like, as they correspond back to that extreme heat. But the broader answer to your question would be that the weights are about the same as a year ago. Yes, they're bigger than they were a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and they always go up this time of year. Always. The fact that they've gone up this slowly is contra-seasonal. In fact, 2014, the weights were going up quicker than they are now. So it's really a function of the kind of animal we're feeding. In the north, it's a long-fed calf now that's got a bigger carcass, and it's part of it. So I don't think the weights are showing anything, and the grade would tell me that we're still pretty current and getting even more so in the south, as some of those areas are starting to see their grade actually decline a little bit.
So looking at box beef numbers, Wednesday saw some decent trade taking place,
which would be a function of the lighter kill, which we'll probably get to here shortly, I would guess, knowing how you ask good questions. But the lighter kill is helping to prop up the beef, but so is the calendar. I think I smarted off last week on your program about how, the reason that the beef went up after the Holcomb fire was because of Labor Day. It's an anniversary day to that, by the way. It was August 9 when the Holcomb fire was. I happen to know that because my wife's birthday. Yeah. Anyway, so the boxes will turn from here, I believe, partly because of the lighter kill, but mostly because of the seasonality of featuring beef again for the Labor Day weekend.
So no surprise. I mean, since you brought up that Holcomb fire, let's kind of look at where we've been and where we've moved. Are you more confident with the way this trade has gone since that fire, or do you still have some reservations?
There's things, in my opinion, that are still wrong with this market, Susan.
Okay.
Love the price. I think those that are going to talk this, we got to become more efficient, more vertically integrated. We got to cater more to the efficiency of what that system looks like. Taking a carbon copy of the hog thing or the broiler thing, I think that's the worst possible thing we can do. And I think some of my critics would say, well, what's the matter with you, Brad? You're making a bunch of money. Yeah. Wait until that cycle turns again, and where we lose our leverage, and then we'll be standing there waiting in a line, sucking our thumb. We're hoping somebody will bid on the cattle once a month or something like that. So no, I think it's still the time to fight for what I believe is better for the market in general. I think between the fire and the COVID pandemic, obviously you can see where you rate if you don't have a formula when you go through those two things. So I hope we never have another black swan, but I got a feeling that, if we're at this long enough, we'll be talking about, boy, I didn't see that coming, and I don't even know what that would be at this point. Certainly nobody thought about the COVID thing in the kind of capacity that it ended up being.
All right. Well, okay, let's dive into that topic now. As you look at this market, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think, to put it in perspective, it's August and we've got $1.88, the second highest price we've ever had, at a time of the year when usually demand is poor and supply is big. If we can do this, which I prove we just did, I'm supply side optimistic, barring something weird happening on the demand side. I think what's got us here partly is the fact that we've done a spectacularly good job of staying current, getting current, selling cattle on a timely basis. And I would encourage all of us to keep doing that. I think the longer we can do that, the difference between being backlogged like we usually are in my neighborhood this time of year to being pulled forward like we definitely are this time of year. If we don't get 190, in my opinion, this week up here, it'll be probably because we don't have the kind of cattle that to get it. In other words, a big fat black steer, because they aren't around where we've pulled these cattle forward that far. So we got a nice set of leverage here. Packer's going to slow the kill down. He's going to do all of that. He's doing it already. But he hasn't gotten much to show for it yet in terms of being, and reminder, 2014, Packer killed 32 hours for a long time, months. Some of this is because it's less cattle, it is what it is. So I remain very, very optimistic, particularly if we start to retain heifers, especially and particularly for the end of the fourth quarter and the beginning of the first quarter next year.
All right, you bought retaining heifers. When are we going to start to see some telltale signs that we're going to start holding back these girls and keeping them at home?
Looking as hard as I can. It's a little early maybe to tell. I did a little rough math out of one of the big videos here, not last week, the one before that. And this isn't scientific enough really, but I counted up 88,000 steer calves and 22,000 heifer calves.
Wow.
I know 4-to-1 would be crazy. One robin doesn't make it spring, but I would say because I think guys do speculate maybe with their heifer calves a little longer than they will with their steer calves or when they're going to sell. I would say, honestly, will probably be November before we get a real feel when these guys do decide, are we going to retain these guys or are we going to send them to the sale barn in Octobers and Novembers like they would with their steer calves? I expect across the north to see a significant amount of it. I would say less of it in the south where they still have issues here with not adequate rain to support the pasture for the cows.
So one final question as we wrap up. Folks have seen the headlines over the last 24, 48 hours. We've got chicken processing plants that are going to be closing down. There's 30 plus hog facilities that are no longer to be raising hogs in Missouri. Does that put some nervousness for you in the market just over in general for these proteins? Obviously focusing on the cattle, but just in general, what we're going to be seeing for consumers' perspective?
I think one would be foolish to not recognize some of these markers, potholes, indications. I do think that our beef industry is significantly different than the poultry industry, thankfully, and a lot different than the hog thing too. I wonder about this move toward efficiency, whether that got maybe the pendulum has swung so far that those industries that are so vertically integrated have stubbed their own toe by becoming that way. You've had some unique stuff here. You've had extremely difficult labor issues during the COVID thing. Now you've got, we're just coming out of it at an almost record high price for feed for some of these things. I mean, a combination of labor problems, high feed, and now interest rates doing what they're doing. Those are stuff that give you some queasy feelings about, no industry is immune from it. So I'm a proponent of doing some risk management using put options here on the cattle. These things got a lot of risks. They're high priced. I think the market's all right, but I'm guessing. So yeah, I use your head in case something weird happens, I guess, but keep an eye on it. But I think the cattle thing's a little better shape than the other two.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. Best way for folks to get a hold of you, Brad. And I know, by the way, you'd have a really good
we got a phone here yet, but kkvtrading.com. If you get on that thing, you'll get to see what we're all about. And if you want to call us, we're 800-358-3047.
Well, thanks. Brad Kooima has been joining us for this week's Cattle Call. As we always remind you, Commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, not suitable to all investors. And that's been this week's Cattle Call on the Rural Radio Network.